Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is January 6th, 2023. I have run the Justice for David Crowley and Family page on Facebook, looking into the deaths of David, Comel, and Rania. I created that back on January 19th, 2015. In the sense, since then, the Apple Valley Police Department have ruled that David killed his wife and child, and then following, lastly, himself. The page, which has grown to about 4,000 members as of today, did additional research on the case and pointed things out to authorities that were anomalies, pointed things out to the lead detective to make sure they looked into certain things that didn't make sense. A lot of anomalies in this case. And they did their conclusion and basically said that David did it. It's done deal. There's nothing more to look into. So there was concern, there was talk. Was there a police cover up? Were they just inept? Were they incompetent? What happened? What happened here? It shouldn't be taking a handful of armchair investigators solving a crime of this magnitude without anyone else looking into it. So a couple of years later, 2019, I hired a private investigator to look into the David Crowley case. And I had a couple of criteria in mind when I wanted to do this. I had to be thinking when I did this that if the response came out that they agreed with us, that what's the response going to be? How is the general public going to discredit us? So I couldn't get someone locally, someone that I knew, someone from my town, because if it came back and they said they agree with this, they would just say, the doubters would say, well, you pick someone you knew, someone that you were connected to. Obviously, they're going to say that. So I needed to pick a non-biased person that was indeed a private investigator that I had no relationship with. And so I wanted to get also someone roughly my age, a father that had children and was looking into this and was not afraid to look into some with an open mind, some additional strange cases. So I landed on Kenneth Maines. I picked from Philadelphia, private investigator that specializes in cold cases. Now, the Crowley case isn't a cold case, but Maines was a guy featured on a couple television shows. He was that mid to high level profile. I didn't want to pick just a random Joe Schmo that no one ever heard of, because I would face backlash then as well by saying, well, you picked, who knows this guy? Who is this guy or gal? So I wanted to have someone that was in the public eye. And I also wanted not to say anything about the case. Of course, you don't want to bring up that there's a conspiracy. You don't want to bring up anything weird about it. And so I went to Kenneth Maines, and the other reason that I picked him, I selected him, was that on his resume were three well-known detectives, forensic pathologists that are well-known and that I personally like myself. Dr. Cyril Wecht, met him one time at a JFK conference down in Dallas. One of my all-time heroes, Dr. Cyril Wecht. Dr. Henry Lee is someone that I have a lot of faith in as well. I like the work that Dr. Henry Lee has done over the years. And Detective Joe Kenda from the television series, Joe Kenda. Well, Kenneth Maines knew all three of these and has gone to classes and courses and workshops and gotten certifications from these three. So it led me down the path to hone in on this guy that I had respect for. Now, I was going to hand him this case and hire him and not say much of anything. Keep it on the download, be very vague, be very generic, because I wanted to see also what is this guy's, how good, what's his worth in salt from his background. Is he really this good? Is he just an average guy? That was the other thing I wanted to get from it. It was somewhat a test. The Justice for David Crowley group pretty much by this time knew the answers and pretty much knew what happened in the case. Greg Fernandez, another person on a friend of mine, author of the book, was also on the page, was in the process of writing a book that came out in the year 2019. The Gray Stage, written by Greg Fernandez Jr. This was coming out in 29. I picked it up in 2020, read it, love it, because it's fact-based. It's facts. There's no opinions. There's no suggestions. A lot of times people look at us in our group as, and even Kenneth Maines did it on his video, basically says, you know what, I think there was a conspiracy here. Let's find and cherry pick the things that fit our narrative so we can get by with saying that. That is not the case. The only things we've brought forward and shown are facts. And so we thought the detectives in the case did a lousy job and didn't follow up on the leads and went so far in investigating some things, but didn't go that extra mile. Kenneth Maines on his website was a guy that really says that he goes the extra mile. He's passionate. He's a high energy guy, and a very high level is what he expects from himself, and really pushes the envelope, goes that extra mile to be as good as he says. So when I gave him the case and hired him, he went through and read the case, the police notes, everything that was out in the open is what I gave him first. Now, mind you, I'm waiting for this aha moment for him to write back. We never spoke. I never met him in person. It was just email only. I wanted to make sure I had a trail of correspondence that showed my correspondence with Kenneth Maines. I was waiting for this aha moment. Most people that read this report or delve into this case have 5 or 6 moments where they say, well, that doesn't make sense. How can that be? How can that even be true? How can that be right? Very few people look at it and close the book and say, yep, slam dunk. And typically those are non-critical thinkers. If you're a non-critical thinker, you'll read the police report. You'll say, yes, David did it, and done deal. But when you explore further and you explore the surroundings and you look at it from the totality of the event, you see many other things that are coming into play. And that's what I was hoping with Kenneth Maines to hire him, is to overturn the other additional stones, to do the work that the detectives in Apple Valley didn't do, or chose not to do, or were told not to do. Things like that. And so he did a video. It came out. He published it on his website, on his YouTube channel. It came out December 30th. So Kenneth here has a video. It says, David Crowley, The Gray State, from the case files, a real cold case, detective's opinion. And Kenneth Maines gives his opinion on this case. This is not a cold case. It was an open and shut case. We're not looking officially, no one's out there looking for the real killers. It's only a small group of us armchair investigators that are doing so. But he is an expert in cold case. So he put this video together. It's an hour and 13 minutes long. It goes through why he thinks he came to his conclusion, which ultimately was the same as the police. He goes out of his way then also to say that he thought the detectives did a really good job. They were very thorough. It basically said the same things that we've been complaining about for the last 7 years. So here's Detective Kenneth L. Maines. You can go to his website. He's out there. He's out there as a public figure, and I wanted to get someone like that just to see what his thoughts were. And so he did this investigation. It came back and said, basically, I agree with it. David did it. You can look at the evidence, and it's a slam dunk. And to somewhat in a condescending tone was saying to people like us, the active group members of the Justice Page, are kind of conspiracy theorists. We want to have things fall into how we think. We've got ourselves convinced of a certain resolution or response, and that's what we're going with, and we've got ourselves convinced, and we're not open to anything else. So very interesting, very interesting. So let's get back to the notes that I just wanted to do a response here because some of the things were taken, I think, out of context. So we gave him the case. I gave him the case. I didn't tell anyone else on our justice page who I hired. I didn't want to have any other bias. I did it solely by myself. I paid for it. I got him hired. I got it done. I got the conclusion. And then I made everything public. And I didn't agree with what we said. But it was very interesting nonetheless. So reading the police reports and the official narrative is one thing. And so I sent him all this. And then I sent back the next round to Kenneth Maines and says, here's anomalies that the police didn't talk about, but we brought them up to police. What do you think? And here's some things from you take another step back and look at the total picture. Kenneth Maines talks in his video about looking at an investigative case from the totality of it, not just what you see there, but the totality. And I wanted to get on that because that's something that we take pride in ourselves, and that's something that we feel Kenneth Maines fell short on. So the big thing in this case, and I'll go through maybe, I've got 8 or 10 bullet points. For me, it's the Facebook posts. The Facebook posts that were on David Crowley's personal Facebook page that were deleted after the bodies were discovered. Deleted. Outright gone. After the bodies were discovered. So this is not a page, this is not a group, this was not his project Facebook page that other people had access to. This was his personal account. The post that was deleted by David Crowley, by whoever, obviously not David Crowley, but David Crowley wrote, I'm looking to hire and get a new group of trustful, surround myself with some trustworthy people to take this project forward. Now that to me is a huge point. Huge, something that a detective would pick up on. Why is anything deleted from a Facebook page, a personal page? Mind you, police have his laptop and his cell phone on site. So who has access to anything that he's got? Who's logging into David Crowley's account to take this off? The post says, I'm looking forward to reforming my close group with some trustworthy individuals. Basically calling out the people he was working with as not trustworthy. To me, that's a red flag. I was waiting for Kenneth Maines to respond back right away. I say, wow, that is messed up. That doesn't happen in a normal case. There's something goofy here. I never got the call. I never got the fact that he even found that strange. The Apple Valley Police Department has a new task force that was created, I think, just a month or 2 before this case came out, called the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit. A unit that all they do is electronic researchers and digging in to get the research. They're the ones looking at the cell phone, the hard drives. David had 15, 16 hard drives in his home. This was the group that had to go through the painstaking process of going through all the data. What was on the hard drive? What was on the laptops? And so when the case was done and they brought it to their conclusion, we as a group brought these things, this was one of them, to the police, lead detective. You find it odd that posts were deleted from his Facebook page, not just any old posts, but posts leading to a crime, leading to something that's not going to jive or line up with the official narrative, was deleted. David didn't like the group he was working with, so he's slowly pulling himself away. He wanted to get someone trustworthy as he's moving forward. So that's my first idea, a trustworthy team. He did not like those around him. Now, Kenneth Maines talks about David Crowley secluding himself, going into withdrawal, isolating himself, all these things, most of which were on the documentary that Eric Nelson produced. Eric Nelson's documentary film, A Gray State, is a propaganda piece. It's pushing It's cherry picking all the things that David did wrong that made him look bad and shed him in a bad light, put that out there to help the general public reaffirm the narrative that he did it. Not the case at all. We're still looking for a documentary to be made on this case, an authentic documentary, but that was certainly not the case. David was not isolating and feeling depressed and down and out about his financial banking situation and led to suicide. None of that was true. We exposed that. Our whole Facebook group justice page exposed that. David was on cloud nine. He was happy. So that was not the case. He did sign the movie deal. He was working with a lawyer and an attorney and an executive producer to move forward with this big deal that he had. He just needed to get these guys that were causing him problems out of his way to move forward. So he was happy. He was not in dire straits. He was not in financial straits. Someone in the case, a neighbor of one of the folks, Sean Wright, his name is, in the Gray State Project, a neighbor of his came forth and forward to our group anonymously at first and says, I talked to Sean Wright out in front of his house by the mailbox, and he asked me if I knew about this Crowley case. And he says it's real wild stuff, triple murder, he killed his family, 3 people dead, and started showing me images on his phone, the crime scene. And she's like, "Wow, that's really nasty, very graphic stuff, very graphic." And she said one of the images was a woman's hand laying on the living room floor by itself, or maybe it was even in the basement. I'm not sure where it was, but a woman's hand. Would have been Kamel's. It's the only woman in the case, not the child. Kamel's hand laying there, basically chopped off, cut off, whatever. Keep in mind, of the crime scene photos, that photo doesn't exist. There is no photo of a woman's hand. We thought, after hearing this, that maybe the police didn't release that photo because of its gruesome nature. They are allowed to withhold some photos that are gruesome, just for the general public. They said, no, there are some that we withheld, but nothing of that. We did not find. They confirmed they didn't find any additional body parts throughout the house. There was no body parts, other than bodies that were there. Now, they blamed the dog on scavenging of eating some of the parts, but there never was a photo of a woman's hand. Now, doesn't that strike you odd that someone's smartphone has a photo of a woman's hand laying on the carpeting? The only thing I can deduce, and I'm not a detective, is that why does that photo exist? Why does that photo exist? Who took the photo? The only conclusion I can draw was someone at the crime scene took the photo and decided to save it and decided to share it, like a trophy, something you can share, something you can have that no one else has. We brought this to the attention of police as well, brought this to the attention of Kenneth Maines as well. Not interested. To me, that's a big point. A woman's hand, meaning someone was at the crime scene. Why would Sean Wright have a photo of a woman's hand, Kamel's hand? Remember, she was found with no hands. Neither hand was found for Kamel Crowley. Where were the hands? Well, they were cut off, sawed off, chopped off, whatever. And whatever sort of strange torture these people went through. Her hands weren't there. The dog did not eat the hands. They may have eaten some things, may have scavenged on some things, but not eat the hands. Now, police didn't find any body parts in the house. So how does this photo exist? Why was it there? Why was it there? Why was it taken? Who took the photo? And why on earth would you save something like that? Much less show someone. Those are the things that I'm waiting for the antenna to raise from these detectives to say, aha, that can't be true. Well, maybe it's not true. Maybe it's made up. I can't imagine this woman making up a story like that and then coming forth with the nightmares that it gave her by seeing this. These are the things, these are the stones that we want overturned in a case like this. We need people to investigate, to do a deep dive into a case like this. Say if David did it, why would there be photos floating around of him cutting off hands? Official narrative is that he shot them all point blank. That's it. We don't have a reason. Every case needs means, motive, and opportunity. Means and opportunity are there. There's no motive. Police did not come up with motive. Kenneth Maines did not come up with the motive. They took a stab in the dark thinking it was this, that, or the other thing that could have done it, but they didn't have an answer. You need to have a motive in any crime. Kenneth Maines knows this. The detectives knows this. The lead detective, Detective Gummert, knows this, and the police chief knows this. What's the motive? There is none. There's no motive. You can't have a crime without a motive. I find it odd that we know this very elementary step, but others do not. Witness statements. Witness statements in the police reports that show texts being done. David's father mentioned at one point that he sent a couple texts to David that he never responded to. Sent some texts to David wondering how he's doing. That's fine. Fair enough. I'm sure any parent would send texts. But when we received the AT&T cell phone records of David's phone, he had two. One number, then he cut it off, shut down the account, went to another account. Two accounts. If anyone's texting David, they're going to be on the text section of that report on his cell phone records. Every single text, every text is logged. Now, we were assuming that the Apple Valley Police Department detective and team of detectives, once this AT&T phone records came in, were going to go through the process, double checking, cross-checking, cross-footing, as we call in accounting, making sure it ties, to reconcile it. Are the witness statements correct? The witness statements cannot be taken with a grain of salt. The Apple Valley Police Department took the witness statements as fact. Kenneth Maines took the witness statements as fact. No, number one. You get the phone records, you look back to the date that they said the text was sent, and you confirm the text was made. Now, on an easy, simple case, do you have to go into this detail? No. You have to go into this extra layer of detail, down to this next tier of detail. No. But in a case like this, a high-end case, I'm going to call it, one that there's several justice pages on Facebook solely regarded to this case, a private detective gets hired to look into this case because of the anomalies. This is now the time in your career that you go that extra mile. You've got to crisscross and tie everything up. David's father's texts never came in on David's cell phone, right? Fact, not an opinion. Not an opinion, fact. David's father was lying to police. Why? Your next question should be, why? Why is that? David's brother and a couple acquaintances on the Gray State Project team also said that we sent texts to David, wondering about his well-being, acting like the concerned, buddy. Those did not come back. Those are not legit. Those were never made. Those texts did not come through. Why are witnesses lying to police? I think that's a very fair question. I don't believe Kenneth Maines cross-checked the texts with the dates and the times that they said the text came through with the very easy to read cell phone records and just ticked and tied to make sure that they happened. Chris Peck, allegedly sold David Crowley a bag of weed on his last meeting with him before their family's demise. When police asked, how did you communicate? How did you communicate with David? He said, oh, it was all done by texting. David sent him a text that says, do you have any? Do you have any? Chris says, yes, swing on by. It was the last day of school for Rania before the Christmas break. David allegedly showed up with Comel, his wife, picked up a bag of weed. Cell phone records don't show any of those texts taking place. Now we find weed at the house on the dresser. It's common knowledge that David and Comel recreationally used weed. I've got no problem with that. Now, if the detectives didn't look into to ensure that, number one, David Crowley did ask for some weed on December 19th, I believe is what it was, they don't tie out. Kenneth Maines did not look at the cell phone records to tie out if this drug deal text even ever took place. So they needed to paint David Crowley as a discredited guy, a conspiracy theorist, a gun enthusiast, a drug user, kind of office rocker, kind of a batshit crazy guy. And that's what everyone fed police, things that help support that. Now, police ate it up with a spoon. They were spoon-fed everything, meaning this guy did do it. Close it up, shut the book, case over. The reason we're here is because these things are not true. The reason we're here on a case that doesn't involve any of us is not here because we've got nothing better to do. It's some sort of hobby of ours, something we enjoy doing. It's frankly disgusting, the fact that we have to do this to make people wake up, smell the roses, and see what's really going on here, i.e., Apple Valley police detectives. I don't think they looked into any of this. Now, Ken Maines, highest of the high, as far as elite level of detective for cold cases, I don't think it ever crossed his mind to check the texts. That's just a fact. I don't think it. I don't think he did. I was waiting for him to email me back and say, Dan, we got a whole world of problems here. None of the texts jive. Handful of people are lying to police. That email never came. Never came. And I'm not making this up. The magic bullet. Kenneth Maines said in his video, I repeat, I quote, police go in, find 6 shell casings, 6 bullets, bullet fragments, 3 people dead, everything's accounted for, problem solved. While that statement ultimately becomes true, it wasn't true to begin with. January 18th, police left with 4 bullet fragments and 6 bullet casings. Doesn't tie. The math doesn't add up. They left, they took away the crime scene, called in the cleaners, case done. All we got left to do now is detective paperwork back at the office. Nothing at the case. There was yellow crime scene tape around that house less than 48 hours and was open. They had 4 fragments and 6 bullet casings. Now, the magic bullet. Kenneth Maines says that the bullet that killed David had his DNA on it. It was collected, problem solved. Well, that also is not entirely true. The bullet that they found, allegedly that killed David, and keep in mind these are mushroom bullets. These are hollow point bullets that mushroom out. going through your head or skull are going to collect brain matter, blood, tissue, bone, a whole variety of things on these nasty headshots using a 40 caliber weapon using hollow points. The bullet recovered the next month, mind you, the next month, only had David's touch DNA or nuclear DNA. His DNA, but touch DNA. Could have been him loading the cartridge. It could have been him. Those are all his bullets, his weapons. His touch DNA was probably on everything. Now, David and Kamel and their buddies typically still went to the same gun range, the shooting range, out in the country in Minnesota. They fired their 40 calibers. There was spent bullet fragments probably in the hundreds in that area. Anyone could have just picked up a fragment or two, dropped it in, and planted it in the attic. Now, let's stick to the facts. On the 18th, the bodies were recovered and taken out. On the 19th, January 19th, a 911 call comes in from the neighbors of Crowley's because of some disturbance, some loud noises, and some weird things going on at the house with a bunch of guys. Enough to call 911. I'm guessing one of those noises was a gunshot into the ceiling. I don't know. I'm guessing. When asked about the 911 call and what they were doing, the 4 or 5 gentlemen that were there said that they were in the attic. And they said they couldn't believe that police missed the hole in the ceiling. My first question, I'm assuming the detectives for Apple Valley's first question, and Kenneth Main's, certainly his first question would be, how do you know what the detectives saw or didn't see? These guys on the Gray State Project came onto social media on the 20th. They said, I can't believe police missed the bullet in the ceiling. I can't believe how they could have overlooked a ceiling bullet. The 3 bodies were found in the living room, a few feet away in the entranceway to the house. Straight up in an 8-foot ceiling was a hole, a bullet hole that police missed. We thought at first that maybe the bullet hole was there and they just didn't get a photo of it. There are no photos of the crime scene showing a bullet. No bullet hole in the ceiling. Remember, that's the shot that killed David. So they left. The yellow crime scene tape went away. They didn't have the bullet, and they didn't know the ceiling hole existed. I'm guessing that the ceiling hole didn't exist until the 19th when the ruckus took place, enough so that neighbors called 911. Now, the killers, in this case, were sloppy and made many mistakes. The mistakes is what I was hoping that Kenneth Maines would come back on, and his antenna would be raised up by saying some of this stuff doesn't make sense. The staging of the crime was sloppy. Kenneth Maines made the statement that the staging was so good, or almost too good. There's mistakes you wouldn't make when staging the scene. Well, they're smart enough to know that the fragments didn't tie out to the bullets and the holes didn't tie out to the final death of David, requiring the group to go back in again to make sure it happened. And they had to do that on the 19th under the auspices of cleaning up some things for Kamel by getting some of her things because her family lived in Texas. Well, the gunshot hole wasn't there until the 19th. Whether that bullet was legit or not, that was found in the attic, that's item number 57, it did have David's DNA on it. Was it the bullet that killed him? No, it couldn't have been. It could not have been the bullet that killed him. But a bullet with his touch DNA Who knows where that came from, and who knows how it even got there, if it was planted, what the deal was. All I know, their words, not mine, the individuals said that they were in the attic. This is in the police report. This is not the section that I had to give back and kind of point Kenneth Maines in the right direction to say, I would look at this section a little harder. I did this later, after he already came back and said, I believe the police story. This was in the 94-page police report that the Apple Valley policeman said that the kids were in the attic on the 19th, disturbing a crime scene. Oh, the next day, the 20th, a cleaning crew was there cleaning the house, vacuuming, cleaning up blood. And out of the living room rug, a bullet fragment falls free. They call police. They arrive and find out, yep, this is a bullet slug. This is a fragment, another hollow point that we didn't find the first day. This is the 6th one now. 6 casings, 4 bullets found on the scene when they closed the scene. 1 found on the 19th. Sorry, 1 found on the 20th from the cleaners. And the magic bullet that was put up there on the 19th of January wasn't found until February 16th, when police finally interview Chris Klein, that said he was in the attic. And he too said to police they couldn't believe that detectives did not see the hole in the ceiling. This is the first time police ever hear the phrase, I can't believe they didn't see the hole in the ceiling. They go on out there again, 3rd time to the scene. Look up, see the hole in the ceiling. Get a ladder, go up to the attic and find the infamous item number 57. I call it the magic bullet. It's more preposterous than the JFK assassination. You can't even make this stuff up. So the bullet that killed David was not the bullet found in the attic, but item 57 was a bullet fragment they found in the attic that had David's touch DNA. Touch. Skin. Touching it, holding it, manipulating it. No blood, no tissue, no brain matter, no bone. Should have been a lot of stuff on that bullet. David's bullet, it's my belief, once again, now this is an opinion, is that that was kept as a trophy, once again, like these photos on smartphone. Someone's got that. Someone's got the bullet that killed him. Police don't have it. Someone's got it. It may have been disposed of now because it's 8 years later, but they kept it. And the reason that one of them kept it, because there was multiple people in the house, is the reason that once it got back that they kept it was the reason they needed to go back and re-enter the house to make sure they put one up there and to create the hole. Now, Kenneth Maines, I don't want to be holding your hand through this whole process of guiding you through this. That was already done. We already gave you all the information. A bullet found there a month later. Number one, let's say, for instance, David did not die. Let's say his wife and child were shot and killed. David doesn't die. This thing goes to court, gets brought before a jury with David in the hot seat. They'd have to throw out that bullet number 5 they found and have to throw out bullet number 6 they found, which was the bullet that allegedly almost killed him, because neither one of those would be admissible to court because the chain of custody were broken. The crime scene was contaminated. Those things would be thrown out. You can't blame David for a bullet that was found a month later. Anyone knows it. That's inadmissible in court. Something that's been tampered with like that. So you couldn't get him on any other murder charge or attempted murder charge because the evidence isn't there. Now, dog was scavenging. Kenneth Maines believed that, like the Apple Valley police, the dog scavenged, was hungry, was eating and feasting on the bodies after not eating for 3 weeks. Well, be that as it may, we have a question. We have one question. The 5-year-old daughter, Rania, her arm was missing. Her arm was missing, not eaten, not partially gone. gone from the shoulder, removed from the socket. I'll repeat that again. Removed from the socket, pulled, yanked, jarred loose from the socket. Not eaten. The dog's not going to be able to get in there with those tendons and muscles to rip it away from the socket. I could have eaten the arm, but not removed it from the socket. That's the thing where your antenna, once again, should be going off, Apple Valley Police Detectives. Lead Detective Gummert. Investigator Kenneth Maines. Where's the arm? The dog didn't do it. The dog didn't eat it. The dog could have eaten the skin, the muscles, but not a child's forearm, the upper arm. Gone. Not found at the scene. Not chewed up. Not found in feces. It was missing. Was her arm another trophy taken away by the killers? I don't know. There's no facts that tell me that the dog ate the arm. Where's the arm? How did it get removed? Who took the arm? Why is it gone? Why do all these trophies of the crime scene seem to be missing? One thing that Kenneth Maines did say was that I find it interesting that Rania, arm missing, broken rib at the in her armpit area, was a fractured rib. He came back to me and said, I find that odd. So I was waiting. I was waiting for the response. Yes, and what are you going to do about it? What's the next steps? Nothing. He just said, I found that was odd. Crickets. Found that was odd. Well, yes, we all found that as odd. Anyone could find that as odd. Your job as a detective is to say, why was it odd? How was it explained? Why was a 5-year-old girl's rib broken? Was she punched? I don't know. I can't imagine punching someone in the armpit. Was a foot used there as leverage to yank that arm out of the socket after the body was already dead, possibly while the body was still alive? I can't explain it. I don't know. The fact is she had a broken, fractured rib, and the fact is her arm was missing. Fact, her arm was not found, not recovered from the scene. Where's her arm? Why are Kamel's 2 hands missing? Why is Rania's entire arm missing? And why is one of David's hands missing? His left hand missing, gone, not recovered, not eaten up and chewed up, bones not found in the feces, missing. So those are the types of things that I was waiting for Kenneth Maines to come back and say, you know what, this is really odd. This is disturbing. I don't understand this. I don't get this. But you know what? I'm going to sit down for the next 2 weeks and I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to find the answer. I'm going to find it. Hired me to find the answers. I'm going to find it. He just said no. I found it was odd. That's when I started piecing together Mr. Kenneth Maines. He sounded like the Apple Valley Police Detectives. Yes, it was strange. His arm, her rib was fractured. Yes. Well, you're detectives. Lead Detective Gummert, what did you do when you found out the rib was fractured? Which one of your detectives did you assign to say, you know what, look into this further? Do a deep dive. Do some checking. Why is a girl's rib fractured and her arms missing in the armpit area? Now, we know that David had a movie deal signed. We've got the evidence. I've sent the actual video of me doing the interview with MEG, Meg, the Mikes, Michael Entertainment Group, the Mike Entertainment Group, MEG. I interview the president of Michael Entertainment Group. It says we had a deal with David Crowley. Didn't say the specifics, didn't say 30 million. We had a deal. Oral agreement, we were moving towards completing it. David was a happy guy. He was on cloud 9. All of his dreams come true. So that now is fact. I'm not pulling it out of the air. We're not making assumptions here. He had a deal. Now, Danny August Mason was not included in that deal. Neither was his business partner, Mitch Heil. They wanted to write them out on a legal agreement to move forward with the film, the movie, the TV series, the web series, what have you. Mitch Heil signed the paperwork. It says, good luck with everything you're doing. Can't wait to see it. Danny August Mason said, no, I'm not going to sign it. I refuse to sign it. I'm not going to sign it at all. $30 million project, you're writing me out of it? Not so fast. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sign it over. He was vested in the business. He was the co-creator, the co-founder. But what did Danny August Mason say to police when asked, how are you connected to the gray state? He said, officer, I'm nothing but an actor. I'm just hired as an actor. Do whatever David says. I'm not involved in a business capacity at all. Lie, lie, lie. Now, we see this in the 94-page report the police did, the very first thing we had received a year after the incident. That Danny August Mason told police he's on record saying he's nothing more than an actor in the film. We also see business documents that show that he's a co-creator, co-founder, heavily vested in this partnership on a business deal. Do the detectives ever look into Danny August Mason? Do the detectives ever do a deep dive into why he made that comment? Does Kenneth Maines raise his antenna and say, why would he lie to police? We've got a half a dozen people on record lying to police already in this case. Not exaggerating, half dozen. That's the question. Why all the lies? You can't have lies in a normal police investigation. You shouldn't have lies at all. Here we have blatant lies that no one follows up on. Detectives don't follow up. Kenneth Maines didn't even determine them to be noteworthy. Now we're getting our motive. One thing we're missing is the deal. If the script is worth $30 million, David's dead. Trying to cut those closest to him out of the project. But the Gray State guys are heavily vested in the project. Who has motive to want David dead? Big motive, money motive, dollar motive, career motive. Here's your motive. But Kenneth Maines seems to think that our group thinks there's a vast conspiracy, a police cover-up, and black ops from the CIA went in and killed this guy, is what we think. I've never told him that once. Is there a conspiracy? Yes. In the true definition of a conspiracy. A conspiracy is a crime involving two or more people. That's a conspiracy. The David Crowley case is, no doubt about it, a conspiracy. Two or more people involved in the commission of a crime. Now, for people doing the crime, they have to have the motive. They wanted that script. How do you get the script? Kill David? No, that doesn't do anything. Killing David doesn't give you the script. David owns the script. You kill David, or the government kills David, Kamel owns the script. Something happens to Kamel, the next remaining heir goes to Rania. Rania owns the script. Why do you think in this crime, remember now, we've got to think of it from the totality of the crime. Why were all three people dead? Why was the entire family dead? Why was all of the remaining heirs killed? I don't believe, honestly, I don't believe that the Apple Valley Police Department ever went down that road. I honestly believe Kenneth Maines has never even thought of that. I don't think it even entered his head. You want someone dead, you kill the person. If they're anti-government, you kill the person. If they're stealing from you and moving the script and writing you out of the script, you kill the person. Worst case scenario, of course. Never do you ever kill the family. Never. Unless it comes down to an asset that's going to roll to the next remaining heir. Now, Kenneth Maines knows this, obviously. He does cold cases. Why else did those guys want the script? David wasn't going to give it to him. In fact, he was cutting him out of it. Danny August Mason lied to police. David Crowley gave Danny August Mason a deadline of December 16th to sign his legal agreement. A deadline. He wouldn't do it. He refused to do it. But if you ask Danny August Mason, I was texting him, I was stopping over at the house, I was hanging out with David, we were good buddies. No, none of that's true. You were not good buddies at all. So this is one of the things I consider more of a slam dunk. $30 million script. And many people put many years, 4 years of their life to do this, and they find out now that they're not going to be part of it. David Crowley goes on Facebook and says, I'm going to rebuild a new trustworthy team and take this project to fruition and complete it. That's a shot across the bow right there. Any detective knows that. Kenneth Maines knows that. The Apple Valley police detectives know that. That's the shot across the bow. Why do you think that was the Facebook post deleted when they tried to pin it on David isolating himself? He was getting thin. He grew a mohawk. He was disheveled. All these things. They're all lies. None of those are true. Everyone who made the statement said David was getting thin, losing weight, and was disheveled. David was working out. He was keeping up on all of his fitness. Wife's a dietitian, eating healthy. He wasn't disheveled. Let it sink in. He wasn't disheveled. He never was. So who got the script? David dies, Comel dies, Rania dies. The script now falls conveniently into Dan Crowley Sr. and Dan Crowley Jr. David's brother, who he didn't get along with and didn't talk to since August because of a big blowout. His father, who he hadn't communicated since, I don't think, August or September timeframe, and who lived 45 minutes away. Both are very interested in the big bucks. And they were both, neither of them were going to be involved in the big bucks, only David was. So they get the script, it falls into their hands, and who do they send it off to? But Danny August Mason. May 5th, 2015, Danny August Mason hires a lawyer, a patent attorney lawyer, to get a new trademark. It creates a new company with the state of Minnesota Secretary of State called Gray State Universe LLC. We've done our homework. They were going to take the script, start a new company, and push it out there, push it forward. Forget David, we'll take it and we'll do it ourselves. They're not that bright. So we exposed each of the plans. What happened, what they did. It doesn't take much to put A plus B plus C plus D together, right? It's not a leap of faith to put the facts together. All these things I mentioned are facts. Facts. We've got it on the timeline. We've got it on the timeline. Now, for the guys not making money for 4 years, unemployed guys, most of them with criminal records, peppered criminal records, looking to make cash. Not only do they want the script, but what's in it for me? What's in it for me? How do you pay a hitman? What's the going rate for a hitman? How do you hire an assassin? I think these guys, more than likely, this is my opinion, said, hey, we'll just do it ourselves, give us some cash. October 18th, 2014, a $50,000 amount was taken out of a bank, removed, withdrawn, not a check. Cash from a teller was withdrawn from Dan Crowley's account. Dan Crowley, the dad, David Crowley's dad. Strange? I don't know, maybe. Was it a mistake? Was it to cover a bill and they put money in the next day, a transfer in the accounts? No, there was a withdrawal made. There was a transfer made later to cover it up, but a deposit was never put back in. $50,000, in other words, is unexplained. Does it relate to this crime? I don't know. That's the job of the detectives. I don't know. Detectives, more than likely, are going to see a $50,000 cash withdrawal 2 months before a murder of 3. And I'm guessing lead detective Gummert probably said to one of his detectives, check it out, do a deep dive, overturn all those stones. We want to see what was behind this. Talk to them, interview them. What was the money for? I don't think they did it. I don't think Kenneth Maines did it. $50,000, triple homicide. What's the going rate for killing a person? 10, 15, 20,000 each, 30,000. Maybe a child's less. I don't know. Maybe David's more. It fits. It fits. Guess who withdrew it? Dan Crowley Jr., the brother. Why would he be withdrawing $50,000 of cash just months before his brother was brutally murdered? His brother that he didn't get along with, his brother that he didn't talk to, hadn't been speaking to since August. The bank account it came out of is a POD bank account, a trust fund, essentially. It's payable upon death, payable upon deceased of the owner. The owner of the bank account, these are all in the records, by the way. We're not making this up, not pulling this out of thin air. The bank account owner is Dan Crowley Sr. It's a trust account for his kids. You look into that account, which was also in the bank records, Wells Fargo in particular. His trust account, he was divorced, by the way, not remarried, but divorced from David's mother. He named 3 people as beneficiaries on his account. His daughter, Allison, his son, David, and his other son, Dan Jr., Dan Crowley Jr. 3 were the trustees. When and if Dan Sr. dies, the balance in that account would roll over to the 3. I don't know how they split it up. I don't know what the will is, what the will says. Dan Crowley Sr. is still alive, so it's a moot point. On average, there's $300,000 in there on the months that I looked in that account. A payable on death account is the owner's account only. Dan Sr., his account. The children, who are the beneficiaries, only become beneficiaries and only have access to that bank account and the dollars in it when the account holder dies. Dan Crowley did not die. Why is Dan Jr. pulling money out of that account in cash? Well, maybe he didn't. Maybe Dan did. Maybe the dad, Dan Sr. Dan Sr. tells police, and I believe he's being truthful this time. He says, I was out of the country on business in Germany for most of October 2014. Most of October 2014. So I'm guessing most is 2, 3 to 4 weeks, 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks. Out of the country for 3 weeks. In Germany, the withdrawal slip was handwritten from a Minneapolis or St. Paul, Minnesota branch location of Wells Fargo in the location in the US. who withdrew it. So a detective, an elementary detective, an elementary version of Kenneth Maines already knows we've got a fraud issue here. We've got a fraud case. Potential fraud. Someone accessing funds that shouldn't be. The withdrawal slip says Dan Crowley Sr. That's the owner of the account, is Dan Crowley Sr. Dan Crowley Sr. was out of the country in Germany. Couldn't have been the one making the withdrawal. Must have been his son forging it. Now you can come to any conclusion you want. You can come to any supposition you want, any opinion you want. I don't know. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. All I know is the facts. That's Dan Sr.'s account. Dan Sr. didn't make the withdrawal. The withdrawal happened in the middle of the month. Maybe a different story if it happened on the 1st or 2nd or 3rd of October, maybe the 30th, 31st, when he got back. Smack dab in the middle of the month is October. Dan himself, his words, tells police he was in Germany. So now we got a problem. We've got a problem. I think I would have sat down with an hour or two with each Crowley, Dan Sr. and Jr. in an interview room if I was a detective and got to the bottom of this $50,000 withdrawal. It certainly wasn't on the up and up. It certainly wasn't legit. If it's not legit, it's fraud. Forget the triple murders, forget the triple homicide. Wouldn't the Apple Valley Police Department now be going to this family under the auspices of fraud charges? Now, they may not. Family's been through enough, 3 dead. We don't want to inconvenience them with more issues. I'm not going to charge the brother with fraud. But it is. Maybe this would all help tie together the big picture. The totality of this event, if you start piecing the breadcrumbs together. Apple Valley Police had it in their head that David did this. They're not going to look at the money. They're not going to look at a $50,000 withdrawal. That's going to be setting off red flags in the IRS and in the banking community altogether. I'm sure that when the withdrawal happened, Dan Sr. in Germany got a notification. That's how banks work. Dan Jr. did the withdrawal, forged his name, and got the money out without even knowing his father would notice. We're not dealing with bright people here. Those two, father and son, probably had an interesting conversation. But because of the death and the involvement of the script and everything else that took place, they probably have an understanding to just let it go. This isn't rocket scientists, folks. It's not rocket scientists. Not a rocket science. The last thing that Kenneth Maines says is that you see 3 dead bodies, you see some footprints, you see bloody footprints. You know the blood, it's already been tested, it's Comel's blood. What adults are not wearing socks? David's not wearing socks. David left the footprints. No one entered the house, no one exited the house. There's no broken entry, no forced entry. Patio door slider, 1/4 inch open. He didn't have an issue with that, even though he lives in Pennsylvania. Minnesota, no, not January. Your back slider door is not open in January in Minnesota. Never. There's no reason for that. Whose footprint is it? Does it appear to be David's? From an elementary detective? Is he taking a Detective 101 class? Yes, it's got to be his. He was barefoot. There was blood. The blood's not him. And there's a bloody footprint. And there was no forced entry. It's almost like I think that the detectives in this case go through a little checklist of 20 or 30 things to check. Check, 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 check. Did it ever cross their mind that maybe it's not a footprint at all? My question is this: is it a footprint? I don't know. Looks like a footprint. Bloody.
Okay, yeah, and now we are live. And good evening, everyone. Hello, YouTube world. Yay! We actually have Sophia with us today. So I know we're live here and we're waiting for YouTube to catch up. So I'm going to hold on a second. So once I see us live on, yeah, here we go. It's popping up. And there it is. Okay, again, hello, everyone in YouTube land.
Hello, everybody.
And as you know, this is Sophia.
Yeah,
and
it's just been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been on to discuss the David Crowley case. Now, Greg is going to be trying. God, English would be good. Greg is going to try to join us in a few minutes. Now, William, I have not heard from William, but I do know that he works later in the day. So I don't expect to even possibly hear from him for at least for about a half an hour. And hopefully he'll jump on. Have not heard. He hasn't confirmed or said he can't make it. But we did hear from Greg. Sophia heard from Greg. And he's trying to get some things done, and he will try to jump on in a few minutes. What I have seen, and I have read the comments that have been left, and we have some new people, not only to my channel, but who've been following the Crowley case. And so they kind of, it's like, you're home here. I'm glad you're here. Join with us, talk about it. Feel free to ask us questions, or if you feel like you want to do a live, jump on and do a live, or if you want us to do another live on a specific topic of the case, or if you want us to do a video on the case, let us know. And we will be more than happy to get in there and get it done. I have, I think I have over 200 videos on my channel. Not all of them have something to do with the case though. So you might find a lot of your questions answered if you look through some of the videos. Sophia, do you want to say anything while we're waiting for Mr. Greg?
Wow. I was just listening to what you had to say. I'm here for the ride.
Okay. Well, tonight, okay, and tonight we are actually going to discuss the blood analysis. Now, it's a topic we've talked about a lot, and I've done videos on it. Sophia has done a lot of research on it. We did a video together on the blood, not just the DNA analysis, but the blood spatter patterns. There's a lot there that show not only was there probably somebody else there, but that the case and the murders did not occur the way that the narrative says that they did. We see 4 gunshot wounds to 3 heads and 0 throughout the entire house, inside, outside, garage, car, nowhere. 0 high velocity blood spatter, which is what you get with a gunshot wound to the head. There's low velocity, medium velocity, but no passive, but no high velocity blood spatter at all. And that's a problem. I mean, it's a huge problem. And in the blood, we see that oftentimes when it's a mixture of 2 or more individuals, David, Kamel, or Rania, or 2 of the other 3 are excluded. It'll be a mixture of 2 or more individuals, and the other 2 parties are excluded. And then they say that they would not expect to find this DNA match among the general population, anyone that is not related. Well, that only leaves a related person, which they never took blood samples. They didn't compare family members. But you would think, I mean, it's like common sense, common knowledge that if you have a blood sample on a weapon or a piece of evidence, and it shows the blood of one person. There are 3 people there. The other 2 people are excluded from contributing to that blood, but there are at least 2 or 3 contributors to that sample they've picked up. We have a problem, and it's a big problem. So, you have anything you want to add?
I mean, that's just the thing. They didn't do any testing outside of who was there in the house. And with those DNA results, it's contradicting the original story, the original narrative. But there are 3 major factors that basically rule out what the original narrative is. And that's the DNA, that's the blood spatter, and the fact that David died first, which we'll get into again. If you haven't watched our other videos, then this will be big news. But, and this is literally the reason why I just dropped out of the videos later on, because the case was over for me. But
I mean, you can't argue with that. It's like when the autopsies state marked autolysis for David and then autolysis for Rania and Kamel. Or Ron, I don't believe I still am completely 100% convinced it is not Kamel on that floor. So the female body on the floor. And it's like, hello, you have one that is further in decomposition, David, compared to the other 2 victims on the floor. So explain to me, Apple Valley Police Department, BCA, and the coroner's office, please explain to me how someone who has further decomp died after those that they supposedly killed. And then the narrative was that David shot and killed his family, but then waited, what they said, maybe up to a day before he took his own life. And it's like, this dude's a miracle. You know, he's got all the things, all the cards up his sleeve to be able to, you know, do all that, die hours, if not a day later, and then make it so that his body decomposes faster in the same environment as the other 2. It doesn't work that way.
Correct. And then when you add in the fact that there is not any high velocity blood spatter, which high velocity is from a gunshot wound. Everything else is low velocity, medium. Medium is blunt force, and knife, low velocity. Oh gosh, it's been a year.
Like injuries, dripping, you know, as you're walking and it's dripping, that'll be passive. And then you have transfer patterns, and then you have all this other stuff. And there's evidence of transfer, there's evidence of passive, there's evidence of medium, but zero high velocity. And that is the only spray pattern you can get from a gunshot wound.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, there's also proof that these bodies, if it actually is them, they were moved after they were supposedly killed. Because if you look at the carpet where Kamel was laying, if she had died there with 2 gunshot wounds to her head, that whole area would be saturated in blood.
Yep.
But once they removed her body, and you see another photo of that living room and the carpet where the couch is, there's no blood there.
Yeah, there's no blood under any of them. There's decomp fluid from where the bodies had come in contact and were starting to break down. Now, there is evidence of that, but none of the bodies there's no blood underneath any of the areas. Now, David was missing a hand. Kamel was missing 2 hands, one under her body, one above her head, and then her head and the hand were covered by a blanket, not visible. When they came in, they had no idea she was missing her head or both of her hands, because again, underneath the body, and then like this, and then her on her stomach, and the top of her head was covered with a blanket. So not visible. They couldn't see anything. But still, so when they moved the blanket and then they're looking on the floor with all of these limbs missing, there would be blood, and there's not. No pools of blood at all. But there's, again, the huge problem. And I remember Greg talking about this. I think this is his bone of contention, that on the recliner, and the footrest was on, I think they lifted it up later or something to show the blood spot, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a while, but you can look at the photos. But when it's in and on the floor, there's a pretty good size blood saturated section on the lower end where it's close to the floor, close to the rug. But there's no blood on the rug. None.
And they never tested it.
Yes.
So, I mean, they did test it, but they didn't run the test for the results. Let me rephrase.
Yeah, did they? Yeah. And it's like, I don't even remember them swabbing it, but it's like, even if they did, yeah. So if they swabbed it, we'll look at that here in a minute, because I have the spreadsheet and I listed everything that they swabbed. But it's like, and if they're swabbing that, why would they not want to know who did that? You would think that they would want the entire puzzle, but they did the pick and choose. Well, let's look at the gun, which is fine. That makes sense. But then when you see David's blood on the magazine, which is loaded inside of the weapon, and there is zero way for that David's blood to end up on that magazine when he was not hurt. And they admit this, that he was not hurt prior to dying. They said they couldn't find any other wounds. But yet his blood is on the magazine inside the gun. And they have fingerprints, but they couldn't determine whose fingerprints they were, because they didn't know if they were old fingerprints or new fingerprints or fingerprints on top of another fingerprint, or was it fingerprints highlighted by the blood, or was it left in the blood? I mean, they went through this whole thing in the report. And you would think they would want to try to figure something out, at least try to get a match on these prints, but they did nothing with them at all. And no question at all about, well, why is his blood on the magazine inside a gun? How did it get there? It's impossible for him to get it there by simply just shooting himself in the head. It doesn't work. I mean, there are so many miracles that happened in regard to David in this case. The miracle bullet that people are trying to say that 57 is what went through him. And then we know that the left side of his head is facing a window, and the bullet ends up this way up in a ceiling. So if the trajectory is this way, because we have the exit wound out the left, then how bullets don't do magic spins and then shoot up into a ceiling, come out perfectly clean, partially expanded, and way more. I don't know.
Or let's talk about the passive blood drops that are next to the dishwasher in the kitchen.
Yeah, leading to the dishwasher too. And then on the dishwasher they found open, and there's passive blood on the floor leading to it. So that's little drops. There's a drop of blood, and then a drop of blood, and then a drop or two on the dishwasher door because it had been down. And they don't test that either?
They swab it, but don't test it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, that would have been, like a home run right there. That's who did this. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't tested conveniently. So
yeah, because 9 times out of 10 in my research that I did, they say that when there's passive blood, especially leading up to a kitchen, a bathroom, or whatever that's going toward somewhere where somebody can wash up, they say that the majority of the time that is the blood of the killer. Now, since there's a big spot of blood on the magazine that belonged to David, my concern is whoever did that, did they have gloves on and then they had David's blood on their hand, and then they stick it in the gun, and then as they're walking to the kitchen, are they now dropping David's blood? I don't know, but other than that, other than the magazine loaded inside of the gun, David's blood is not at the scene. Ranya's blood is not at that scene at all.
From what they got the results of, what they tested and got the results of. David's blood is not there. Ranya's blood's not there. What they got their blood off of was the knife, the gun, and the bullets that they found, which we have issues with that because 57 was found a month after the bodies were found. And is it 53? That's Rania?
Correct.
53 was found several days later, but it wasn't in the spot that she was it wasn't located where she was. And, it could have been contaminated, which I do believe happened because you look at that bullet, it doesn't look like Kamel's bullets that were connected to her. This looks like a very shiny bullet, and the same thing with David's. It's very shiny, but these are hollow points. Where is the blood and hair and tissue that should be on these bullets?
And here's the sneaky thing that Apple Valley did. We, the public, and other groups have associated these bullets with the victims. They do not ever state in any of the reports that 57 killed David, or 53 killed Rania, or 44 and 42 and 43 killed Kamel. They don't say that at all. They just sit there and run it, and they swab it, and then they come back and go, oh, DNA was found. This DNA was found on this one, and that's it. They never piece it together. They don't tell you how and who and when and what person died, and by which bullet at all. Let's see. Hold on. Oh, there it goes. Okay, Joe Black says, I am so glad to see people are still looking at this case and care. We can't forget this case. I agree. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you. And so, so when we're saying, Ranya's bullet and David's bullet, it's because of the DNA and or blood and tissue that was found on these specific bullets.
Yes. Yes.
Now, Sophia did a whole bunch of research, and she dug in to find out, because a lot of these, when you're reading the reports, there were several, I don't know if a lot is the correct word, but there were several samples that were so minute. Now, can you explain to them how they were able to get a profile with such tiny pieces of DNA? And so when they're telling people their DNA was found XYZ, people jump in or thinking, oh, must be they had all their blood or they had fingerprints. No, we're talking minuscule, tiny pieces that were picked up on a swab. You want to explain how they get that?
Basically, it's the loci or the loci test, LOCI.
Okay.
And this test, you can basically just have like a pinprick of blood, a little tiny grain of salt of blood, basically. And they replicate it over and over and over until it's enough DNA to be able to run a sample or run the test. And that's how they were able to do that. And I believe that they got that off of 57, and I think Ranya's too.
Yeah.
It's been a year since I've looked at this case, so I'm, if I am incorrect on those assumptions right there, I apologize.
Yeah. And I mean, I have been looking over and over, but again, this case that we were given, it's well over 1,000 pages, right, of documentation and reports. Some,
Yeah.
yeah. With the blacklight report, yeah, we're looking at over 2,000 pages. So we have read every page. We have, and so some of this information kind of sometimes, gets lost in the shuffle of our brains. But with item number 57, they had to swab it, and it was phenonegative. They could not find, it said no blood detected on item number 57. So, but they found DNA after doing the test that Sophia was talking about. So it clearly did not go through David's head. Well, it can't. It's not the miracle bullet that enters through the right side, exits through the left, spins around, and there's a glass window right to his left, and have that spin around and then shoot up into the ceiling above and then heading east or whatever over his head. Bullets don't travel like that. So we clearly, the scene is, and then, okay, I'm jumping all over, I'm sorry. But when they left that day, they left with 6 bullets and 1 unspent cartridge. And 3 of those bullets belonged to Kamel. 1 was in the ceiling, 1 was a fragment. What else was
in the ceiling, or it went through the basement?
Yes, it went through the floor. I'm thinking downstairs. It went through the floor and then the AK ceiling of the basement and then into the basement wall. They call it the south wall. That was number 45. And so number 45 had nothing on it. They found nothing. But they didn't leave. So when they're walking out, my take on it is they're like, oh, well, we have 3 bodies, 3 bullets, so we know what happened here. And then when the testing came back, all 3 of those belonged to Kamel. Everything belonged to Kamel. And like she was saying, Ranya's the one that had her DNA on it, which we know did not go through her body just by looking at that bullet, because it had no blood, no hair, but they were able to find trace DNA on it. Or maybe they found some of her blood when they swabbed it. I think that one was phenopositive but her body was also on that rug.
Yes. And so it could have picked up DNA when they rolled that rug up.
Yeah, because they're rolling it and it went rolling out and then onto the floor, and that's how they found it. And then number 57, which was a month later. So we have nothing that, we have no bullet that killed David, no bullet that killed Rania. And so we have 3 bodies and then only 1 body with 3 bullets that clearly are associated. You see the blood, the tissue, the hair. You see that within the expanded petals of the bullets that went through Kamel. And they don't even question their own narrative. It's like an idiot can look at this. And I'm not saying that to be rude. Someone who has 0 knowledge of anything could look at that and go, well, this guy didn't do it. He's not even here. He's missing from the scene, his house, his cell phone. And you were the one who pointed that out, Sophia, that his DNA is missing from his own cell phone. His personal cell phone did not contain his DNA at all.
And what I need to reiterate in regards to DNA and regards to item 57, they never specified that it was blood. So it could have been saliva, it could have been a hair, it could have been skin cells, it could have been anything. And when you look at the picture for that bullet, you see that it is very shiny, very clean.
Well, we can rule out blood because they say no blood detected on number 57. So we know for a fact that does not have blood. So that only leaves the DNA coming from the sources that you were just mentioning. And so, I mean, with all of this and everything that comes back in on this case and everything we have, and then also, like you were mentioning, everything that we have to prove he didn't do it, let's add on the blacklight report. So we have the report of all of the data for the laptop. And that tells us right there on the front page that his laptop that was on the island in the kitchen was accessed. The hard drive was accessed on January 14th. Now, those bodies, regardless of who they are, those bodies were already deceased on the 14th. They were found on the 17th. They're already dead. And somebody accessed the root drive of that computer. And we know that his day one journal was modified. We see all kinds of information on this blacklight report. And when we started pointing this out to the DA and then to the police department, all of a sudden there is an issue and now they can't give us any more. They refuse to release what they had promised us, which was what? The breakdown of text messages? Is that what you were waiting for?
Yes, text messages and emails, which I was promised. And then once we pointed out that there was an issue in regards to the blacklight report, and also that somebody had forged a police document, the one that supposedly shows like the order of death and says that David was smoking pot right up until their deaths. And
was not Detective Kokonos? Or
yes.
how would you say his name? I mean, now out of all of the reports that I've read, and I really need to say this because I don't respect 98% of everybody who was involved in this case, but he is the one person, the one detective that I see that really did a good job and followed what he should have. So he actually, didn't he have to write an affidavit?
He did. He did write an affidavit, and I did receive that. And then I received 2 different letters from the county prosecutor's office, basically stating that if this case ever goes to court, that I was like, who are they going to charge? You guys basically condemned David. So well, basically, from what those letters implied was that they were still looking into the case and that there was a possibility in the future that somebody could be charged with this crime, because they said that murder does not have a date where you can't what is that word?
Prosecute. They can still prosecute, you know, and charge for a murder case. But what they did, and you're right, the DA, what she said, but no, she was the which attorney was she? The district attorney? Who was that?
She was the county attorney for their county.
Yeah. Okay.
So
she's high up. They had to go to her. She then sends a letter to Sophia to tell her that they're not releasing any more information because, you know, somewhere down the line that they could charge somebody else with this murder. And so ergo, since murder cases are never really closed, then now all of a sudden they can't give us any information. And this is a big crock of patootie cakes, because they adjudicated and they closed this case, which means that they shut it down. They said they've solved it. They found the person involved. Ergo, there's no chance that they would reopen it. And they tell us, I had a talk with the captain, chief, whatever his name was, Right Skull, whatever his name was at the time. And no, it was a different one, because Right School would never contact me. He always put it off onto somebody else. So
I think it was the new one.
Yeah, one of the other officers. Oh, there's Greg. Let me add Greg in here. Hi, Greg. So he contacts me, and then they're like saying, "We're perfectly happy. We're not ever going to open this case again. It's done. It's settled." And then all of a sudden they send this letter going, oh, well, we can't give you any more information because we may just go ahead and you never know if we're going to charge someone else in the case. And it's like, you already adjudicated it. Within the courts, it's adjudicated. So you can't use that as an excuse. But we live there, so we can't fight it.
Yeah. And one really interesting thing about those letters is
limitations.
yes, that's what I was trying to think of, and I was going blank. It was right there in my head, and I was just going blank on it. But those 2 letters that I received from the county attorney, they never mentioned murder-suicide. They only mentioned the murders.
Right.
And that really stood out. And the fact that in the future, if they went to court, because somebody was already contaminating the case by forging documents, that this might become an issue. And that was their reasoning for not giving us anything else in regards to this case. And I no longer was able to get the text messages and emails. So.
And what say you? Oh, no. Latin lover.
I know, right? I was cracking up about that one.
You forgot the 4,000.2. That's pretty important.
Oh, I'm sorry. Latin lover 4,000.2. No,
Gotta
what were
get it
you
right.
before? What did they call you before? What was your name?
Which one?
It was
nothing
Hot
good.
Greg.
yes, Hot Greg. That's it, Hot Greg.
Okay, I could change that. I could flip that around here. somewhere.
Leave that one. That's great. That's great. Okay, Mr. Latin lover Greg, what's your take on this?
I've just been listening. I've been listening in, and I think it kind of jogged my memory a little bit about the how is there no DNA on item 45? But then, as you were touching on, there's touch DNA. There's some DNA on 57. Like, shouldn't there be? There should be DNA on all of them, right?
Correct.
So how? And then with the whole cell phone thing too, it's like, how does it happen unless somebody wiped it? They wiped them both clean, but it's. I mean, I could see wiping the cell phone clean. That makes sense to me, especially if they're being held hostage or something in their own home. But how is there nothing on 45? How is that possible? Would they have to wipe it first? Is it how they took it out of the south wall? How does that happen?
That's a good question. We can only speculate. And was whoever loaded that into the magazine, were they wearing gloves and just took it out of the packaging, straight from the packaging with gloves? We don't know. But yeah, it's like if they can find minuscule DNA for David, which would make sense, because if he's the one loading his magazines, it would make sense that his DNA would be on those bullets and they would find something. But yet, You're right. You're correct. On 45, they find nothing at all.
There should be somebody's on there, which I think is one more thing that kind of leads some people to think, well, this had to have been a professional hit on some level, at some level. And you could even make the argument that the whole mess, the reason why the crime scene is so messy, that is actually part of this very sophisticated hit.
Yeah, they created a ton of chaos. So the mess that they set it up to try to look like a crime scene just creates nothing but chaos, because we can run in circles and we point out everything. And it's like, yeah. And we're like, it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And shall we talk about the bullet matching the gun or not matching the gun? Weren't you the one who was coming through with that?
Yes. In the ballistics report, and this is buried deep within the 488-page BC report. And I mean, it's buried deep in there, and it's in 2 places. Now, here's something else that any of our listeners or anyone who watches this, that when you clean your weapon, you do not leave a bore patch in your weapon. Now, David was a veteran. He was in the military. He knew how to clean his weapons. He was creating a movie. They would go out to the range and fire all the time. So he knows that you don't leave the bore patch in the weapon. There's only one place, one or maybe two places that the bore patch is mentioned. They mention that they found a bore patch within the gun, inside of the gun. David wouldn't do that. Now, why don't they mention that, like make that part of the report? But they don't. They list it as items that were found within the gun in one place, buried deep in the report. And then when they're doing test fires, they did 4 separate test fires. So they have 4 bullets. And in that report, it states poor reproducibility for lands and grooves. So they fired 4 separate ones, and they had a hard time trying to get consistent lands and grooves, anything to match up. And then they take item number 57, compare the lands and grooves with the small pellet the fragment, tiny fragment of number 31. Was that it, Greg? Because I know, Greg, you were the one who pointed this out a lot. They match 57 to the weapon via item 31, which is a petal, just a fragment. And then they say that the lands and grooves match.
And the way that they worded it was so freaking confusing. It's like, okay, does it match or not? Because what's going on here? It was tricky.
Yeah.
It was, and I know that we had some back and forth on that a lot. So.
Yeah, they made it seem like everything was cut and dry, and then nothing is. There's absolutely nothing here that is cut and dry, where you would just say, okay, yeah, that's definitely a double murder suicide. Let's go on to the next case, which, as Sophia knows, the next case is weird too. So something in the
weird, but it adds up a lot better than this case did.
They also missed bullets in that case too, remember? At least one bullet. It was like, so that's how they roll, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, and I know this is hard to understand because I didn't get it either. But the one time I went and I spent the day at the coroner's office with my friend, and the one call that we went on happened to have been a shooting. And I asked them because they figured out they had missed, when they got the photos back. I'm trying to think of how it worked out. It was so long ago, but then they figured out that they had missed one of the bullet wounds on the body until later, once we got back to the coroner's office. And I'm not sure if the body was there, and then we're looking at the body. I can't remember. It's been too long. But so I asked them, I was like, well, is that normal? Do you guys normally miss bullets? And they're like, yeah, you have no idea, because sometimes it can go through a wall. Sometimes it gets lost in the drywall. Sometimes it gets lost in furniture or within a body. They're like, sometimes we can't find it. Mm-hmm. So that kind of makes sense. However, it seems like AVPD went out of their way to find just enough to match their narrative, but then it came back and bit them in the butt when the DNA all proved to be Kamel. So
yeah, or like Nick's favorite saying is, "Why didn't they look up?"
Yes. Well,
if
yes.
that hole was there, obviously they didn't look up.
And when I think it was Boone or Booth, because I get those two names mixed up, that was called to go out. First of all, we know Klein was the one who reported it. Klein said he was there with David's father. They contact David's father. He's like, I wasn't there with him. I did not let him into that house. So, we'll get to you in just a second. Yes, I know, right? So we know that, so whichever one it was either Boone or Booth. We know Klein was there without permission. He went up into the attic. He's now contaminating the scene. He admits he's trying to find it. And then their first words were, they opened the door and they saw an obvious hole in the ceiling. Now, if you have over 30 people running through this scene for 10 hours, 12 hours, maybe, whatever it was, and nobody from BCA, Nobody from the coroner's office, no one from the police department, no one from the sheriff's department. Nobody saw the bullet hole in the ceiling, but yet they want us to believe that this obvious hole was there the entire time. Explain it to me. Now, Joe says, for those who listen and can't watch, Joe Black says, the bore patch is ridiculous. You don't have to even have military training. That's firearm basics. Also, bore patches are usually white, reassembling the weapon. It'll stick out like a sore thumb. Thank you. I have been trying to put this out there. It's part of the cleaning thing. You don't leave a bore patch in your weapon. And yet to have this buried so deep in the reports and only mentioned once and never mentioned again is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. God. Okay, sorry, my phone auto-corrected. Not fireworks. Plenty of firearm training.
You want to read what you wrote for those who only listen?
David had plenty of firearm training. He went to the range and often did drills. And you can read that in his journal too. He was excited that he was going away for that Saturday to do drills. And, you know, I don't even know exactly what he was doing at the range, but, you know, it looked like he was having a great time. He would take photos too of them at the range. So
yeah, and I went and I asked several people up here where I live, one of them being my son, because my son is really into going to the range and firing weapons. And I asked him, I'm like, how likely is it for someone who deals with weapons all the time that they would leave the bore patch inside the weapon and then fire it? And he goes, nobody would do that. And it's across the board. When you're asking even people at the range themselves, they're like, nobody does that. And David was too smart to leave a bore patch in his weapon, you know? And then Sophia says later, she says, so that's a really wonderful point, Joe. And that's for those, again, who are only listening and aren't watching. So we have poor reproducibility on the test fires. We have a bore patch that was located within the weapon. We have no DNA of David on the weapon itself. No bullet that matches his, no bullet that matches Ranya's. So no high velocity blood spatter. We have DNA with a mixture of 2 or more people that will exclude David and or Ranya or Kamel.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an extra person. They say that the mixture, when it's of 2 or more people, that it would not be found within the general population. They would expect not to see it outside of a related person in the general population. So that only leaves a related person. So who is in there doing this and touching these bullets?
And then you add in that little note at the end of David's autopsy saying that he had, Catherine, explain once more.
Yeah, he had marked autolysis. Is that what you're talking about? The marked autolysis?
Mm-hmm.
So again, when you're going through the stages of decomp, as soon as you cease to breathe and brain function and everything just stops and you're truly dead, the body begins the process called autolysis. It's where it begins to break down on a cellular level. So that, imagine, for lack of a better term, the body begins to eat itself. It starts breaking things down. And with autolysis, with the stages of autolysis, you have, I think, 3 or 4 different stages. So the very beginning, they just died. It's like whatever. And then early stages, early to moderate, you can have up to 25 to 50% of the nucleus of these cells will be broken down because the body is breaking it down as cells are dying, decomposing, and going away. Those are the stages that Kamel and Ranya are at. Now, David, with marked autolysis, he is at up to a 75% of his nuclei are now broken down and become water within the cell. So
Yeah.
that means he has been dead longer. His decomposition has been going on for a longer period of time. So if you have that, the police cannot explain to us how it is that that's the case, and yet they're still saying he committed murder and then suicide hours, if not a day later.
Correct. So with everything added together, we have a staged case
Mhm.
where David was being used as the patsy. So,
What's your
and
biggest
really-
Greg? I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Greg.
Within the whole case, what's your biggest bone of contention?
Oh boy.
Or two?
Yeah.
Go for it. Give
That's
us
tough. Yeah, I think after everything, I think it's still, I think one of the biggest problems is how quickly, I would say. If there's some items, I mean, there's so many items to go through, but the fact that they didn't test that the big blood stain on the recliner, I think that is a big problem there. You know, but just and like how would they say that David did this? They kind of made it seem like they had his fingerprints on that wall. You ask some people, they'll still say David's fingerprints were on that wall because they don't know any better. You
And
Yeah.
the reports clearly show and state no DNA was found and no prints were found within the blood. Says it
Right.
in the reports.
Right. So they're like, why would anyone think that that David wrote that? We don't know who wrote it. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. So it's just there's so many things like that. But I think that recliner still bothers me because it just leads me to think that it's the biggest evidence, the biggest proof that the bodies were moved at some point. Somebody moved those bodies. You could say whatever you want to say, whether they died in the living room or not. It's hard to say that all three of them died the way that they were found. I think that's at the very least, even the most jaded people can see that.
Yeah. And Joe has another big point right there. Facts don't make for sensational headlines.
It's true.
And
That's why
that's
that's why they didn't put him in there in the beginning. It was all David was a conspiracy nut. He was working on a movie. It was all of this anti-government stuff, like all that. Like David isn't anti-government. He was in the government. He was all right with it. You know, he understood what the difference was. There's good cops, there's bad cops. There's good soldiers, there's bad soldiers. I think David ran in it with the truth movement. I think he ran into a lot of people who he thought were good. And I think he realized that a lot of them weren't. And once he found himself that he was surrounded by this weird group of people, the shadowy dark force, that I think that's when a lot of this really began to unravel. And that's why the gray state, they get so mad whenever you talk about David was distancing himself. They'll agree he was distancing himself, but they say he was distancing himself because he was crazy. They won't tell you he was distancing himself because they were crazy. He realized they were weirdos.
Right, because his day one journal, he talks about that in his day one journal, how he's like, no, they're just all trying to, hang and prosper off of my coattails. And I'm done with them because they're doing nothing and I'm doing everything and I'm done with it. So, yeah. So A says, seems nobody who tries to cover the case actually reads the reports. Thank you, guys. And that's the truth. It really, really is. So,
Or the ones